So when we were planning this talk, Ari gave me another sort of presentation slash talk he did in the past, and that was very useful. But what did I do? Of course, I ran it through Gen AI and asked it, well, what are some interesting points that I should be thinking about? And of course, after that, I did use my brain and filter it and try to figure out what I should be doing in addition to what it suggested. So here we are. We'll ask a few questions, and then I'll sort of give my take on some of the things Ari is saying, and then we'll open it up to questions for the rest of the folks here. The first question is really around the title. Ari, what do you mean by time saved to intelligence saved? What is that, and what are you thinking when you think about it in the enterprise context?
Well, hello everyone, again. So the point of that was really the sense that I have where there's a lot of people that are still thinking of AI through the lens of efficiency, and I think that's just a flawed starting point because AI, in my mind, is much more about productivity. And actually, when I think of AI, I actually use the term amplification more than either of those. And so you really do narrow your thinking when you're looking at it as I can reduce headcount. You expand it a bit more when you're starting to think, well, I can get 5 people doing the work of 10, and then you expand it even more when you're like, well, I can get one person to do the work of 100. So that's the kind of what I'm referring to, and what I'm. The link to the concept of intelligence saved is that the mechanism to go from efficiency to amplification is by harnessing kind of what I would call the company's brain, kind of a shared layer of intelligence that you collect and you build around key areas, key levers that drive the growth and success and profitability of your business. Often they're systems of record, but in the case of Moody, it's like the number one kind of unit that we're trying to build intelligence around is the customer. I mean, that's kind of the huge priority. The more we understand our customers and their preferences and how they view what we provide and how they view that relative to competitors and how their preferences and their priorities are evolving, that gives us an understanding of how better to position what we do for them, what to build, how to serve them, so it's just a huge factor that we're trying to build intelligence over. And I would say that I kind of look at sorry, am I like taking up the rest of your questions? I'm doing it on purpose. The rest of because like I'm scared of the Oracle. Imran, he's going to ask me hard questions. So I think of in our organization, I think of those two levers. One is the unit of growth, which is through the understanding of the customer. And then I think about the factors that slow us down, and those are the control functions. So first tackling the areas that will help us drive growth, and watch out, because the next thing I'm going to tackle is the control functions. It's the risk, it's the governance, it's the compliance, it's all those areas that when we try to move fast, they slow us down.
Fair enough. Just my take on that is, so when we talk about intelligence saved, we have to actually save this intelligence as we go, and there needs to be a place to put it, right? So people need to start thinking about agents and what memories do they have? How do we keep those memories and that sort of thing? So that's one sort of thought process that I've had. Another thing that we need to think about is the intelligence. Right now, the bulk of the intelligence in organizations is still human intelligence. And how do you save that and capture that in a repeatable, reusable, scalable way, right? So that's another thing to think about.
By the way, on that one, there's a related message, which is I think a lot of companies are communicating around the idea of agents, and they tend to be kind of task oriented, and you know, sometimes people talk about workflows, which are tethered agents around a workflow, and I tend to kind of think about it as a system, which links to what you were saying. There's a substrate of intelligence that the agents read from and contribute to, and so they're really just offshoots of this substrate versus, you know, solving individual problems. They are contributing to a system of intelligence. Sorry.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So you have agents, you have humans. What other things do you need in your system of intelligence?
Well, so first of all, you have to, I think I mentioned it earlier, you really have to make sure that the capabilities you're offering to the humans are sufficiently valuable, that they're using the tools, the solutions that you provide. And as you're building them very intentionally, you're also capturing those implicit knowledge that they have, that the system is not able to retrieve from documentation and from data, because it sits in people's memories and experience, and when they go away, that memory and experience goes away. So you have that, and then you have to have the mechanism to capture the information that you want to capture and store it. And when you store it, that's kind of you can think of it as exhaust, and you have that huge challenge of that middle layer of context engineering, which is, how do I bring the right information to solve the right problem at the right time from all this knowledge that's been gathered? And that is a huge challenge. We have limited context windows, and we have to bring in the most important information. And if you think about this accumulating knowledge base or intelligence base, it grows and expands, and you have to really build very smart mechanisms on how to orchestrate it. And my general sense is, I'm not trying to solve it perfectly. I'm trying to make sure I capture the exhaust and do my best to solve it and bring the right context. But I also know that if I don't store it and I don't capture it now, I won't have it, in the next few months or whatever, when the technology and the capabilities and our ability to kind of muster that, kind of orchestrate that context better, when it becomes more accessible and capable. And gosh, we would wish that we would have had more intelligence to pull from if we hadn't. So start now. I mean, that's my view. It's really, really, really important to start building that brain, that shared brain.
So I think I hear a few things there. One is log everything, right? Figure out what your agents are doing, log those transactions, keep those. Even if you don't think you might use it now, you might be able to take advantage of it and use it later.
So just to be clear, yes, log everything, but intentionally make those agents bidirectional, so that you're not just logging, usage and interaction. You are intentionally interacting with the human, asking, very much intentional questions that you believe will be important for you to store. So it goes way more than. It has to. You have to think about these agents as bidirectional.
Right. So agents are doing things, coming to decisions, creating sort of common understandings, and those are some of the things that you want to capture as part of the digital exhaust. The other thing that we've been successfully proving out at multiple other companies is the sort of capturing of the human tribal knowledge into reusable, flexible graphs that then improve the accuracy, improve the context, get the way I put it is, okay, the problem is you have 100 billion chunks of data that you want to analyze. Which 3 or 4 chunks are really the important ones for this task on hand right now, right? That's the question that you have to start figuring out how to answer. And then even within that, out of these chunks of data, there might be 1,000 sentences. Which of the 10 sentences are the real crux of the meat of the matter that is needed to actually do the task or answer the question, right? So all of that comes from what I would call multi-model, multiple ways of looking at the same data in order to find the sort of key context that you need to actually execute on it, right? So those are things that are working for us that we've seen in other companies too.
I think the way that you guys are solving it is essential. I don't see how you can capture. I don't see how you can manage that context without understanding those relationships and interactions. There's different types of memories,
Yes.
So there's techniques that you have to think about. In our case, a lot of that memory is much of it is what you're describing. Then we also have that procedural memory that needs to be retrieved, and that is an accumulating and evolving set of knowledge and understanding that you have to start figuring out, well, which of all, what's the most relevant, what's the most current, how do I solve conflicts when they're stored? So some people have different views. How do you define a fact versus an opinion? Is there really a fact, or is it two facts? Two facts can actually, a fact can be wrong, right? So like some person may say that, well, this person in a sales context is holding the budget, and others says another person holds the budget. Well, they both could be true. They both could be wrong. So there's a ton of logic that has to be built into procedural memory management that gets very complicated. I don't know if a knowledge graph solves that, but that's your expertise.
I would say it doesn't, but there are cases where you definitely can get that solution. I just did a recent 10Q analysis and question and answer sort of thing. And what we discovered was that the concept of most recent quarter was a varying number depending on what your data was and when your quarters ended and what was stored in your data, right? So just sort of that simple concept is an example of something that varies over time, right? And just being able to capture that and understand how important that was in the context of financial analytics was a fun exercise to do. With that, I guess the next question I want to ask is, what is the biggest mind shift you have to have in an organization to move from using AI tools to evolving a corporation to have a set of AI agents and humans working together in a very productive, intelligent manner?
I describe it in one word. I really do believe that there has to be a conviction at the senior levels as to what AI brings to the table. What is your philosophy? What is your strategy around AI? When we started going down this path, it was like, well, we're going to build agents that solve this workflow or this task or help, or do this thing, and then our clients need, a loan origination solution and, a risk monitoring solution. It was a set of independent problems that we would solve, and we're still doing quite a bit of that because it's not like it's not needed. The conviction and the mindset is around the concept of the system. And so when you shift your mindset from saying, well, I'm going to solve these individual pain points or workflows or tasks or whatever, and you shift it from that to we're going to build this intelligence layer, it really defines the prioritization, of what you're going to do next and why. How does it contribute to your conviction, to your view as to what's going to be important in the next 2 to 3 years? Another way I kind of think about it is, I haven't found the right word for it, but was it you who said like opportunity cost? Like, it's not quite opportunity cost. It's like a lot of companies, I hear it all the time at Moody's too, like the concept of a no regret decision, and it kind of I bristle at that because sure, yeah, we want to make no regret decisions, but what we really want to do is decisions that we will regret not having made or delayed. And so I don't know, it's kind of that anti-fragile kind of, I need to come up with a good term for it, but it's more than opportunity cost. It's the loss of that compounding effect that happens when you've delayed a decision or didn't make it. So I want to make decisions I'm not going to regret not having made in a couple of years.
Okay. So that makes sense. Basically, move forward fast, but also take risk and governance and compliance and all those sorts of things into account as best as you can, right? So thoughts around that?
Those risks, and so when I think of that, I think that's you have to have that. You have to have a mechanism to make sure you're avoiding trouble. There's a lot of trouble that you could create, and so you do need a governance mechanism. You do need risk controls. You do need all that. So all I'm trying to do here is, you have a governance mechanism that includes IT and cyber and AI and vendor and legal, and there's all these different dimensions of committees or people looking at every decisions through the different lenses, and often the rubrics or the scorecards, the reviews share much of the same information. They might look at it through different angles. They take time. The people that are involved have varying degrees of understanding and of what's going on of the technology and the capabilities and the risks, and so so that tends to delay decisions. All I'm trying to suggest when I say tackle this area as the next area just is to see if there's a way to maintain the rigor and the risk oversight, but speed it up in a way that allows you to progress at the rate of AI, and that's important.
Which one of those is the most difficult for Moody's with you? And do you have pathways that you use to
Okay.
around that or facilitate?
So I'm going to repeat the question. Which one of those that Ari just mentioned is the most difficult for Moody's, and do you have pathways of addressing that particular one?
I will tell you this. It's like I might have to cry if I have to describe it, but the technologies that are available, you're thinking about the models or the tools. When you want to test them and you want to bring them in, you go through a very lengthy process to get those approved, and you lose a lot of time when you go through that. And by the time they get approved, there's a bunch of new ones. And by the time they get approved, not that there's new ones, they keep changing, you know. So it's like, okay, so you know, we want to get Windsor for cursor, and then like, okay, then, you know, 2 hours later, they've got this new update, and they got these new models, and in them, and okay, so you're approving that with Claude in there, but then it has to be within a certain cloud environment that's kind of, you know, private and all that. And it's like, but then they introduce this new agent and new capability. It's like, well, that has to go through every year. So the ability to adopt technologies that at the rate that they're evolving and is a real limiting factor. And so I don't know how you can move as fast as you want without access to the latest technologies, and they're changing so friggin' fast. So there needs. So I always kind of I spoke in Austin a few months ago about AI regulation, and it's just the point that I was making there is just like the regulatory environment has to shift its approach to align with the speed of change, and that's true at the corporate level. It's just like we can't have technology moving at this rate, and a company saying, "Well, we're going to be AI ready, and we're going to be, you know, we build AI native solutions, and we're going to be on the forefront." But at the same time, your governance mechanisms are still operating, and as if the technology is still kind of the traditional way of technology, the technology was being introduced. It's happening at a different rate now. So that's the challenge I face.
Which control function that you mentioned moves, you know, morphs the
It's-
fastest, you know, or changes, or
Well, so the process involves a series of experts, which I suspect is similar across most companies, where you have a review of IT and cyber, and so the AI technologies, the vendors that we're onboarding that are bringing out these tools and capabilities have to go through these series of reviews, and it's that. So I don't know if you're referring to the technology that we're trying to bring in or the process that's slowing us down. The technologies we're bringing in are those models and tools that are AI, that are supposed to enhance our productivity, like coding tools and agents and things like that. But the process is the series, and often not sufficiently parallel series of reviews that they go through for approval. That's the challenge. I don't know if I answered your question.
when you said risk, governance, compliance,
So there's
which one is the most fluid or challenges you guys the most?
so that's what I was kind of suggesting in the next in that second part is that it's not that any of them individually are so challenging. It's that the fact that there's quite a few of them. There's IT, there's and they each have to have a review that makes it that is a delay. But you know, and it really depends. You know, so if you know, I'll give you an example. You know, we wanted to bring you know, mechanisms to kind of scrape information. I don't even like to call it scrape, because I don't think AI truly scrapes. It actually reads information from the web and summarizes it. But like the terms, the legal terms associated were very problematic. And so, you know, and so in that case it was illegal. But in another case, there's, you know, not insufficient security controls or privacy controls, or like, you know, so it really depends on what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, and I'll give you a tactical example of privacy. One of our companies that we've been working with basically captured enough human knowledge to figure out with a very high degree of accuracy that this is personal information versus corporate information, and was able to filter out the personal information and only keep the corporate information, right? So that's an example of using technology to accelerate the policy implementation in an automated fashion, right? So
Where do you draw the line?
where do you draw the fuzzy gray line? is really the question. Yeah. All right. So I have another really meaty question here, which is, how do you architect trustworthy knowledge retrieval, which kind of impacts the privacy aspect right now, and ensure that the data is available at scale?
So, in the work that I'm doing now, that is really about the way that Moody's operates, I'm not running into it as much. I'm just trying to tackle it because I really want to get client information from people's mailboxes, and because there's a lot of emails and communication with clients, and it's very difficult to get marketing people or salespeople or service people or solution specialists or all those various people that interact with, or product people, to not have to dig through their mailboxes and find the right emails. And so I'm trying to create a way to automate all of that, and that's difficult. Frankly, even our transcripts have some challenges because we have they turn into a pumpkin after a couple of weeks, and so we have a certain limited time frame we're allowed to retain a transcript. So yeah, we're starting to run into it, but where we really do run into it, the privacy is we're trying, when we're putting in information that is proprietary, then we don't want models trained on it, and then it gets incredibly challenging when we start dealing with customer information. So that's where we really, and there's ways to deal with it. And we're there's the kind of like, it's some of the Microsoft and all the hyperscalers have developed very credible ways of dealing with it. But we also have government clients, and we have clients that insist on information staying on-prem, and when there's all sorts of permutations around the process that you ensure and that you don't want to compromise in any way, shape, or form. And there's always a solution. You name a problem, we have a solution for it, and but it's complicated.
Fair enough. On the data and knowledge side, right? Data quality is really important, and there are multiple ways to clean things up. There's sort of algorithmic ways, there's rule-based ways, there's graph-based ways, and so things like that should be considered in your solution in terms of how you classify the data, not just for privacy purposes, but for, this document is about these three entities, and these three entities are one of these three entities is on the not to do business list and things like that, right? So that becomes really important from a semantics perspective. Then also I would say on the data side, you not only need to think about on the semantic side, you not only need to think about your data, but you also need to think about the tasks or questions and what is the intent of the task or the intent of the question. So semantics comes into play in that space as well, quite well. The next question is sort of a broad one, and we could probably spend the rest of our time on this, but let's try to keep it to about 2 or 3 minutes. What are the main security risks when deploying AI agents, and how can organizations mitigate them?
Security risks, right now, the security risks that there's a lot of them. Just like people are using libraries from Hugging Face and we gotta make sure that, these different tools are buttoned down. But my main concern now, and we have a whole organization around this, is the newfangled ways that they're coming up with around prompt injections and kind of insinuating, sort of some nefarious agents within, MCP servers and all of it. I mean, they're going to get so smart about how to infiltrate systems, and so I do worry. I have the most patience and tolerance and sympathy for the control functions that are trying to make sure that whatever we do is firewalled and controlled, and every things that we're testing are sandboxed and secure, and I really worry about all the stuff that we don't yet know of what these crazy people out there are trying to do.
I get it, and I in prep for this question, I was just doing some research on my own too. Some of the crazy stuff out there is the prompt injection, but there's also things like memory poisoning, where you can take in where the memory that's in the database gets poisoned slowly over time by not quite hacking, but by sort of minute incremental changes in the memory. So that's another one that I was looking at.
That's a huge one, actually.
Yeah, another one that I was looking at was inserting into an AI habitat or environment a nefarious spy / agent that's there to throw monkey wrenches into your operations or to steal data or whatever else, right? So that's basically an unauthorized agent, right? But when you think about these things, I think I also did some research on sort of what are the normal ways of locking things down, and everything that we're normally doing still applies, right? So
I totally agree.
least privileges, IO validation, security on the APIs, who's allowed to see what, all those kinds of things still 100% apply. And one of the things I think that Progress has been really well positioned for, because of our security focus, is locking the data down. Once you have the data / memory locked down, you're sort of locking down what a lot of our customers call their crown jewels, and the tension between access and privilege is there, but at least you have the control to dial it up or down the way you need it to be dialed.
Yeah, and the more we're going to start seeing clowns like me building software, I have no business doing that because, we have really smart engineers that really understand how to, do this, and not vibe coded. You're going to have to pay attention even more closely to make sure you have some, maintain those really, really capable full stack engineers while the front line or the product people are prototyping and creating tools, and not get fooled by the idea that it's so easy to build stuff now. Well, it's also so easy to screw up stuff now. So, yeah.
So at this point, I'd be happy to open it up, and I think there is a microphone running around somewhere. One of ours, yeah. Okay. So somebody, if they want to ask a question, raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone. I'll bring the microphone to them. Do you want to? Yeah, sure.
Imran, we know each other from the past, and one of the things that came from my exposure to MarkLogic and the client base and whatever is basically a gap between customers' ability to fathom what the technology does versus what the technology is actually doing, and that's been there for more than a decade by my view. How on earth does the consuming corporation, enterprise, keep up with just basic understanding of what this technology is at its essence.
You have people like me that have a severe obsession, and trying my best to keep up, and I if I'm getting at what you're saying is things are moving so fast and technology is shifting. How do you get a handle on that and key? Or is that what you're getting at, or?
Really, at the enterprise level,
Yeah.
at the C-suite.
Well, the C-suite, is this being recorded?
Yes.
Has always been a few steps removed from understanding a lot of those capabilities and technologies at the level that lieutenants that they have and their teams are supposed to keep an eye on, and so they delegate and they rely on people that are like me that stay up on all this and can understand what's possible, and then engineers that can take what I'm building and turning it into capabilities, and they know the kinds of things to look for because that's their expertise. So it's kind of the same model as you would always expect to have, where as you have more and more people that are senior, not going to be able to have a handle on everything, so they have to rely on us.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, I take that job very seriously too. Like, I bought a Tesla on purpose. I let it do autopilot driving for me. I slammed on the brakes really hard yesterday because it was going to cross a red light in a crosswalk, right? So I push it to the limit because I want to understand what it can and can't do. I used an AI agent to, in theory, double the amount of effort I was doing for a certain task, and for one of those two tasks, it worked. For the other one, it failed miserably. I had to babysit it the whole way through, and I was like, I could have done this faster myself, right? But basically, I think the role of the C-suite is to enable their employees with enough latitude to explore and push the limits as hard as they can within the risk boundaries of the organization.
And you should, and it's very important to also de-risk the things that you can, like the sandboxes and things like that, because, I mean, honestly, there's just risks that we're just not going to fully grasp because they're coming in left and right. So protect your crown jewels.
Okay, we have time for about one more question. Anybody want to ask one?
So I just want to further define this procedural memory management in the context of system intelligence.
So so there's different types of memories. You're trying to remember facts, or you're trying to remember semantic knowledge, and procedural memory is often associated with a process, but in the context of accumulating intelligence, you're building sequential insights on an object. So if it's a customer, and it's the customer's role or preferences or views, so you're kind of building that knowledge base, and initially you're understanding certain aspects of it, and you're adding more, and some of it changes, or the role changes, or their perspective changes, and so when you're actually trying to understand how to tailor a message to that customer, you have this accumulating base of knowledge, and you're trying to figure out, well, I see, the most recent information says that they're running technology or whatever, their CIO and somebody, and then 2 months earlier, it says that they're doing something else, and the question is, well, which one is right? I mean, the reality is they could both be right, because they could be running technology for one division, but they could actually have a different role that covers multiple divisions. So which one do you go with, the most current, and how do you figure out what is most credible, and how do you figure out, has their thinking evolved, or is just different people's perspective on how they're thinking? So that accumulating understanding is what's referred to as procedural memory, where you're just trying to figure out, what is the right context from that entire knowledge base that you have that is appropriate to build your to pull into a context window or whatever. So that's what I mean by procedural. It's this accumulating process of understanding something, and it is really, it's the foundation of what we're doing. And you can think of it as like, okay, so over time it builds and builds and builds. You can learn all this stuff, and you can kind of chunk it and organize it. But at the end of the day, there's different ways of solving it. One is you have incremental summaries, but you don't, sometimes you're like discarding, you're deprecating information that seems to not be important anymore. But then in another context, all of a sudden that last piece of information that you deprecated and no longer bring into the context window is important. So you need to kind of, periodically re-tag depending on the issue. So there's all sorts of mechanisms to kind of manage a procedural memory mechanism that is accumulating in this fashion. Does that help?
Well, thank you everybody for attending.